Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. And Sam Forget is back on the podcast. Most of you will need on this journey through 2026. Most of the time we think about, okay, well, there are all of these barriers up ahead of us, come up against like roadblocks. And then we think, holy crap, because now you just slipped off again. You fell off track again. There's one thing that we forget about in that process. How about the baggage that you're already carrying from the past? Have you ever stopped to reflect, well, what have you been doing before that didn't work? What was it in the past that kept tripping you up that you thought worked, and maybe you still think it worked, but maybe you need to think about it a different way? I think that's a really good place to start this. Many of us feel like we've been doing this for ages, training for ages, trying to eat healthy for ages. We should be further along physically and results wise than we are right now. I got results before, so obviously this way works. You will always get results with whatever your strategy is, because that's what newbie gains are. But that's going to bottleneck if that strategy was never the right strategy to start with. You could have had a trainer in the gym, but that doesn't mean that what you were doing or what that trainer was focusing on with you was conducive for body recomposition, because a lot of people come into this with, I just want to lose weight. And that's what the trainers are going to tailor it to. You've been doing this for ages, but were you practicing and developing the right things? That's the same with dieting, because a lot of people have been trying to fix up their nutrition, but a lot of the things that we've been focusing on hasn't been focused on habits, lifestyles. I struggle a little to talk about the word goal instead of just like, let's get you something to be excited about, to aim for, because it's not really exciting to think, oh, I'm going to cut my calories. Or at the same time, goals never really get you goals. It's the action steps that get you the goals. The goal is you have a vision of where you want to be, how you want to feel, what you don't want now. I think it's really useful to figure out what you don't want now, what has been making you feel like crap, how you don't want to feel. Then you can avoid that moving forward. If you don't know the actual action steps to get there, you don't make those action steps your goals.
So something else that, first of all, I appreciate you having me back. I'm quite excited to chat. Something else that you mentioned before we hit record that I think is a common denominator for each of these starting points that we have is that if you are just constantly trying to enter a dieting phase to lose weight as quickly as humanly possible at all times, and you refuse to ever take a break from that, it rids you of the opportunity to reflect on a lot of these things that we're mentioning. So everything from your previous attempts at dieting, what went well, what did not go well, questioning your definition of, well, this worked for me. Can we really say that? If it was a very short-term, hard to maintain success with that diet, your relationship with food, your lifestyle, what's serving you, what's not. And even on the training side of things, because as we both know, if you're constantly in a deficit, you're not going to get the most that you possibly could out of training as well. Not that it needs to go to complete shit, but you're going to feel better and get more out of training when your calories are a bit higher. So whether we are questioning these previous attempts at dieting, whether we are looking at getting more out of training, I mean, the list goes on. The common denominator throughout is that at a certain point, you have to take breathers from constantly prioritizing weight loss. The funny part about this is most people's resistance to it, understandably, is they feel like, well, I have these weight loss goals that I want to reach as quickly as possible. Why on earth would I take a pause from trying to pursue that? Well, the answer to that question would be, by never pausing, you're actually slowing yourself down, because you're going to be in this constant cycle of maybe one step forward, but then two steps back again, the occasional step forward, the occasional step back. And because you've never taken this breather, because you've never paused to reflect, to learn, to grow in a variety of ways, now 6 or 12 or 18 plus months has gone by, maybe more than that, and you don't have a whole lot to show for it. So again, I would say a recurring theme to see success in any of these areas is being open to these periodic breaks from being in a diet, so you have the opportunity to grow.
I love the fact that you just said, if you're always chasing dieting and fat loss, you're never going to see the things that you want to see on the other side. It shifts your focus, but it's not even that. It's like the energy you bring to all of this. Strength isn't about just how much you can lift. Like, it's a whole energy. not only do you get more out of training when your calories are high, I don't think a lot of people have the same energy into the training until they can make that switch. It's, well, now that you're starting to realize that you're getting better at something, once you go into the gym with some purpose and intent, like, oh my gosh, I'm actually well fueled. I actually have something that I want to work towards, because now I'm starting to feel my muscles working. I feel like not only do people rush into fat loss and always try to do dieting and fat loss, but we don't like to feel like a beginner in the gym. Your back hurts every single time you RDL. Your training in jog not only does that cause issues for your knees and then your hips and then everything else down the chain, but you're not able to have a stable base to then be able to train like an actual athlete. I remember getting my deadlift slippers for like $30. I went to find some for my clients the other day. They're 120.
Oh my God.
Anyway, but what tools are you focusing on? What are you obsessing over most? Most people are obsessing so much over what types of food make up their macros, or is this the best macro split? None of that matters if you're not training hard enough. What you should be focusing on is, okay, how about do you use straps or shoes that you wear? How about a lifting belt? It's not like I would try to work on your brace before you add a lifting belt to it, but like these are the things that actually change your physique. Back to the thing, that is a whole, like when you go in with purpose and intent, it changes the game. Like your whole approach to the journey will change. We need to first get you accepting where you are now, but you're never gonna be happy with everything all of the time, especially if you're a female, because your hormones are insane. When you shift the way you look at things, the things you look at change. What does it look like to love your body? What does someone who loves their body do? They take care of it. They don't smash it into oblivion. They aren't trying to starve it on no calories. I sometimes feel like, oh, I just want a little something after my dinner. I'm really full, but I just want to have something extra. I would probably grab myself a kiwi fruit. Just pretend that kiwi fruit is like ice cream or chocolate or something. But I would find it really difficult to say no to that if I've been dieting for ages and that's led to nothing in return. It's like, well, it's not that you don't have willpower or discipline. It's that you burnt it the fuck out. The surgery, I mentioned it. It's the saliva gland. I got it removed because it was malfunctioning. But I couldn't really eat anything for pretty much the whole week. My performance started to make me feel like an absolute piece of poo. This is exactly why I'll never compete. Like if my performance tanks, I take that to heart, because I'm someone who loves feeling strong in the gym. I'm someone who hates it when I feel like all of a sudden I've taken a huge step back, because I love energy. I love how it makes me feel, which is a huge contrast to where I used to be before, where I used to go in with a completely different mindset because I just wanted to get lean. I didn't like the same way that most people approach it. But that is what can be possible for you when you experience what it feels like. And the byproduct is you get to live a leaner life, a stronger life, a healthier life, and it becomes your identity because you don't like the alternative.
Absolutely. And this makes me think of, I think a year and a half ago now, I competed in my first physique competition. So obviously that was the least amount of food that I had ever had. The constant focus, because it had to be, was on keeping that very low, being as lean as possible. But it came at the expense of energy levels, of course, cognitive function, performance, recovery. And it was like, for one of the first times in my life, I didn't really look forward to getting into the gym to train, because it felt like something that I just had to get through, almost like this mental battle. And of course, there were some bright spots. It wasn't all misery, but compared to when I've had food on my plate and the focus was more approach based of how can I add more that makes me feel better? How can I increase my energy levels? How can I increase strength and muscle? How can I improve recovery and feel better overall? Like you mentioned, the energy that you walk into the gym with, drastically different.
Isn't it funny that that's the way that most people are pretty much living their lives? Typically, if they still have a lot of weight to lose, they are over consuming calories, but it's the way they're going about it, going into the gym with that mindset, that lack of food, that lack of energy. That is why you shouldn't be dieting year round, which is why you feel like you can't lose weight on a particular amount of calories, because I bet you still had the urge to eat extra things here and there. Like you were hungry, you wanted more food, but because you had this structure and you had this short-term goal, you were able to stick to it with discipline, which is what happens. And you can lose the fat just as fast as Sam did. Like he looked shredded, and that is possible for you in a fat loss phase, but not stage lean if it's something you actually want to sustain, which I would assume you do. But you can do all of that. You can say no. You can push yourself when you have absolutely nothing left in you. My partner did the same thing. He competed like in 4 comps in a row. It was insane. And
Wow.
that's why I'm like, I want to talk about this because I can see it. I saw it in him. But he wanted to nap all the time. He was like sleeping on my shoulder half the time. That is why your metabolism slows down. It's not anything else. It's because you are constantly depriving yourself. But yeah, I just wanted you to go on a little bit more about that. I just think it's really important.
Yeah. Him falling asleep on your shoulder, I could not relate anymore. It was a struggle to not fall asleep at 7:30, 8 o'clock every single night. And again, cognitively, so just general fatigue, yes, but cognitively, I never felt anything like that. We're just going about my day. I would be mid-sentence with somebody and I would trail off. And it was like halfway through the sentence, I just had no idea where I originally had intended on going with that sentence. So again, that's the physiological stuff, yes, but from a mental perspective, like you said, the energy shift in how I approach my training was just not great. You know, I wasn't walking in there thinking about what PRs am I going to set today? How am I going to, like I'll tell my clients, let's see what you're capable of. It wasn't that. It was, let me try to just get through these sessions. And then obviously post competition, adding food back to my plate. Yes, there was the immediate physiological upside of replenishing my glycogen stores and getting my metabolic rate back up and all these great things. But the mental shift of being able to walk in the gym excited again to see what I was capable of, to add more weight to the bar, it just became like this vicious cycle, but in a very good way of like, let me, again, add a little bit of weight to the bar. Let me see if I can beat my reps from last week. And it was no longer this box that I had to check or this thing that I was just trying to get myself through. And like we keep saying, most people have never really experienced that with their training because either they've underfueled, only sporadically fueled. Maybe they had an abundance of calories. Maybe the source of those calories was not great. The mindset going into a lot of the training is how do I just be smaller? How do I weigh less? How do I burn as many calories as possible? And it's never been a flip in the other direction of, like I said, those approach-based things of how can I fuel my body better to have more energy, to have more excitement, enthusiasm for the gym, perform better, surprise myself. And then obviously physiologically, like you mentioned earlier, that's what actually changes your body. So ironically enough, when the net goal is to see and feel as many changes as possible, often the path there is to take these breaks from dieting, certainly the extreme stuff, but even just less extreme. You can't be in that not only physiological dieting phase, but also that perma-dieting mindset that can kind of take the joy and sustainability out of things.
Yeah, the joy and sustainability out of things. And it's hilarious because one of my clients actually said something huge. She's like, I actually can't even relate to the word goals anymore because I'm just starting to fall in love with the process now. Like, this is what it's like when it's well fueled. And I'm like, holy crap, like this is what it's all about. Because she came to me from hearing a podcast about me talking about carbs. And in the past, her approach was, that's weird. In the past, in the past, her approach was always, I want to diet for holidays. I want to diet for this. I want to diet for that. And her old coach never really understood like pushing up the calories to a certain amount. With me now, she has been focusing a lot more on seeing herself now as like that beginner, because she's able to see the benefits of learning how to hinge, learning how to squat, learning how to brace. Like, she's actually invested in the process of learning how to lift again, to see yourself as a beginner again, because you're doing a whole new process. And this process is going to be different from the ones you've tried in the past, which is why it is going to work. Because what you tried before, well, even if it did work, did it make you feel really fulfilled? Or are you still trying to chase that next thing? And one thing I said, which I'm going to kind of end it here and then see what you can say on this, except one more thing. Let's start expanding the meaning of progress and tuning into how the body feels, slowing down with more intention, and start seeing it as selfishness in the gym. Because you give yourself, especially as a mom, a woman, you're giving yourself to everyone all the time. This is your time with yourself. And if you can start to see it as that, everything changes. Everything. So I kind of want to dig into that, but also that kind of like a beginner mindset, because I feel like a lot of people want to keep seeing the whole staircase. Like, what's this going to look like? What phase am I in? What phase this? What phase that? And I'm like, I don't like phases. Like, where does this phase thing come from? I'm actually like, you don't just put yourself into, hey, you're in this phase now. You're in this phase now. You're either in a deficit to lose weight. Well, I should say in a deficit to lose fat, which is the minority, or we're progressing. We're always progressing. There's no like maintenance. It's no, the goal is always trying to improve. The goal has always been trying to improve. It's just, what are your calories doing? They're either in a deficit or out of a deficit. And then if you stop improving in the weight side of things, and we feel like, okay, well, add a little bit more food and that can help improve your performance a little bit more, then we'll do that. But I don't feel like a lot of people are even in a place to consider pushing their calories that high. People just need to eat enough to start with, but pushing them higher than that, let's get your training focused on training like an athlete and get all those things in place where you're training hard, because your body is going to change regardless of where your calories are. As long as you're in some sort of maintenance range, voila.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because I think people expect that their workouts are going to change dramatically phase to phase, whether the goal is muscle gain, whether the goal is kind of holding the line of maintenance, whether it's a fat loss phase. But like you said, the stimulus is mostly the same. Like, yeah, you might make subtle adjustments to your training, but it shouldn't look radically different. And then your calorie intake dictates to a large degree the changes you see from that. But from a training perspective, the intention of every workout, like you said, that doesn't change. The goal should always be progress, and then you manipulate the nutrition to complement whatever the goal is. But walking to the gym, the other thing that I love that you mentioned is the beginner mindset about things, because I know you and I have both seen this with other fitness professionals. It's often the people who have the most experience and the most skill in the gym that are the most eager to tweak things, revisit the way they've been doing things potentially for years to try to get more out of the basics, the things they're already, it's almost constantly refining the basics to try to get more out of it, because they recognize that that's actually what getting more advanced is. It's not adding a bunch of bells and whistles. It's not getting super fancy with protocols. It's, let me keep refining these basics year after year after year, which I realize to a lot of people may sound a bit boring, the idea of doing that rather than, bells and whistles and flashier things. But I always say, are you in the gym for results? Are you in there for entertainment? Because if we want to get results, yeah, we're going to keep things very simple. We're going to keep looking to refine. We're going to tweak things over time. I've been training for 15 plus years at this point, and I'm still picking up on little adjustments that I can make to my row to feel my lats a little bit better, or my setup on an RDL to brace a little bit better, to feel that exercise, have it be a bit more smooth, which, like I said, I realize for a lot of people that sounds like minutia, that might sound boring. But when you feel great and you're getting much better results from your workouts and seeing changes, that's the most fun shit ever. That's the opposite of boring. You just have to give yourself the opportunity to experience that. Most people are doing enough to feel like they're doing something and feel like they should be seeing a bigger ROI, but they're not quite over that threshold. So it's just a matter of, you cross that threshold and you never go back.
When you realize that you're starting to get results, that isn't going to be boring anymore. Yeah, you might be doing boring things, but once you start getting results, is it really going to be that boring? I would say that boring is not getting results, feeling like you're getting nowhere, putting in the effort. I think that's why people feel like they're not beginners, because they're putting in the effort and it's making them feel tired and them feel exhausted. You know how people always say, I'm busy. Then you look at what they're doing and they're not even productive. Hi, I'm putting my hand up. That's what people do with training and with everything else as well. It's like, I'm doing all of these things, but is it productive? Is it effective? You could be doing the right, but then you put yourself straight into a deficit again, instead of letting those things actually expand and become something. Like, you're not growing muscle in the 8 months outside of summer. It's like, you're taking yourself away from the overall goal. And I feel like if people can just put aside one holiday season, I would say 2 summers is the best thing, but just put aside a summer or 2 to not care about friggin' shredding down you will be able to stay lean year round and not just summer, because over time you're going to gradually look worse, because over time all of these things, they add tax to it, the mental tax, the burdens, and that's the baggage that you're going to keep carrying, because that's just like adding, you remember the brick analogy, adding the bricks into the bag while you're climbing up the ladder. And it's like, well, you're already trying to climb a ladder that has its rungs too far apart. Now you're adding in more and more bricks to your backpack. Like, we need to stop trying to focus on what is this going to look like in the next like 12 months. And let's just focus on getting you to the next milestone, which is, okay, what are we working on now? We need to fix the foundation of your training so we can actually push the intensity without breaking you, to get you to a point where, hey, now you're feeling confident in the gym. Now we've got these things down. We can start to expand our repertoire in the gym. And it starts to feel a little bit more, I don't know, like purposeful, because it is going to start a little bit boring if that's the way you want to see it. Like, for me, I've been wanting to grow my delts for ages. So what do? The same boring shit of, I'm just doing lateral raises every single time I walk into the gym. I have them on my program every single time. Yes, same lateral raises. Boring. Is it boring? Well, you're not going to increase your weights on lateral raises like a crazy person. I'm either doing, like, it depends on the day. I either use the 7s or the 5s or the 6s. It depends. I don't aim for, okay, well, I need to keep increasing this thing. I'm going to just force these 7s out. I can feel like I'm doing work because I'm flapping my arms like a bird, but it's not productive.
You know what, you started to that point about training intensity and having your workouts be as effective as possible. Something you started to touch upon that I want to circle back to and reemphasize is almost like different audits, like how to know that you're not training intensely enough. So a few things that we mentioned now. Number one, if you have an enormous amount of volume in your workouts, you feel like you're more advanced, so you need to be doing a bunch of things or fancier things. It could be you don't feel like you need lengthy rest periods. And when I say lengthy, it doesn't have to be, powerlifter style, 5-10 minutes taking a nap between sets. But if you feel convinced that every 30 seconds you're good to go for your next set, you'd also mention lifting straps. If you never lose your grip on any RDL variation, on any row variation, you almost certainly need to be going heavier. And I actually have a list that I send my clients. I think there are 8 things on it of 8 ways to know that you're not training intensely enough. But something else that I always remind people of is that 2 things can simultaneously be true. The sets you've been doing can feel hard for sure. And the specific example I always think of is a Bulgarian split squat. Even if you have a fair amount still in the tank during a Bulgarian split squat, the exercise still sucks. So I get why you may feel like you have been training hard, but that doesn't mean you're not capable of more. So to use myself as a quick example, if I'm going heavy on a Bulgarian split squat, maybe I'm using the 40s or something like that. That doesn't mean that these don't also suck, that feels challenging in some way. But another little audit you can do here at the end of each set is ask yourself, if I absolutely had to keep going, I had no choice but to continue, how many more reps could I could? And most people stop when they have 3, 4, 5+ reps left in the tank. And to be clear, again, you might stop there because the set already feels at least moderately challenging. So I'm not saying you're doing nothing and you're not pushing at all, but that doesn't mean that you're not capable of more. And something that I run into a lot with clients here is, well, I don't want to just be doing 1 billion reps to reach that point where I only have 1 to 2 reps left in the tank at the end of the set to stimulate more strength, to develop more muscle. Okay, the answer to that problem is adding more weight, because so many people, they punch the clock, they're in the gym all the time, and they've picked up the same weights for the same exercises for weeks or months or years on end. And sidebar, certain exercises like a lateral raise, like you mentioned, Ruby, we're not going to progressively overload that now till forever. There's only so heavy we can go. But on other things, Bulgarian split squats, rows, presses, squat variations, I find that people just pick up the same weights over and over. They train to the point where it's at least moderately challenging, and that's great. But you need to be digging a little bit deeper and just run through that audit of, if at the end of the set I had to keep going, how many more reps could I do? And for most people, the answer is always at least 2, if not 3, 4, 5+ reps. So if you don't want to be doing 1 million reps, that's where we look at adding more weight to get you to approach failure sooner without having to do, as I mentioned, 12, 15, 25 reps on everything.
Something you said at the start of that is, we've been both lifting for years. And that's the thing, like people see us as different people. Like, no, we are the same as you. We still want to improve, but we've been training for years and years and years and years and years. And we are still working on things. We still have things that need improving. I have things that I fell out of that now I need to bring back the skills of, because skills are about the specific thing that you're working on that's going to improve. The path isn't linear, but the goal's always kind of like, not the goal, the vision's kind of like always the same. I could easily lose a heap of strength on like my pull-ups, for example, but it doesn't mean that the overall vision of I want to build my back hasn't been there, because I've been doing other things for my back. Pull-ups in themselves are a skill. It can be hard without it being effective for muscle growth. That's the exact thing that you were doing in your training when you were competing. When my partner got told that he needs to train at 80% capacity, he's like, I felt like I was still training at 120%. Like I have nothing left in me. He wasn't building any muscle. If that was something that was continuing to go on, he would probably start to lose muscle, if anything else, because now all of a sudden his training effort, training stimulus has felt. His calories are low, where most of you can be overeating but still underfueling and undernourishing, which isn't good for muscle growth. So you're not going to be losing fat. You're not going to be building muscle. You're just going to end up looking worse over time because you're just getting burnt out, gaining body fat in your stomach because of the extra stress that's now added, that cortisol. If you're not sleeping properly, that has a downstream effect. Like what else is happening outside of what you're actually putting onto paper? Sometimes we're not even aware of all of that stuff. Just, I'm sure you were able to boost your calories up like a shit ton after comp finished. Your metabolism just went through the roof. Just the fact that now you're not sleeping on someone's shoulder all the time, your training intensity went up. And that's the same with him. Like all of a sudden, he's got animation to him. This is typically what happens. Like, yeah, you'll have animation for a little bit of the day. Come home from work, come home from the gym, you're exhausted, and then you flop on the couch for the rest of the day. It's not cortisol. It's not hormones. It's you're trying to push a burnt out candle. Like it's not going to work. The other thing about training really hard, if you're always doing 12 to 15 reps, you're going to feel like you're training hard, but you're not, because it's really hard to gauge training hard when it's always 12 plus reps. Yes. It's so much easier to gauge I'm actually training with intensity if you train mostly in the 6 to 10 rep range. But this is also where that beginner mindset comes in again, because you're not going to be neurologically efficient, as in your brain muscles aren't going to work together to make those reps effective for muscle growth in the 6 to 10 rep range straight off the bat. Like you're going to come in, you're going to want to train from like that 12 to 15 to start with, get everything like locked in. And then you start to build your reps downwards, start to lift with more intensity, start to push more weight. And then those 6 to 10 reps can be more effective. But if we just get you training in the 6 to 10 rep range, just because you're training in the 6 to 10 rep range doesn't mean that it's building anything, even though people say, oh, well, it's hard and heavy. That you're not neurologically there yet. That's also why I hate the argument that's now going out there with do less volume, do 2 sets, do 3 sets, do this, that. You're still in the stage where we need to build you up first. Unless you get to a stage where those 2 to 3 sets are enough and effective, then voila. Whereas people think that, okay, well, now that I'm getting more advanced, more progressed, I should be doing more. It's like, actually, no, that's the flip side. That's where that happens. And yeah, I'll let you take that. But then the other side is if you're always progressing, that's also an issue, because were you going hard enough to start with, or was that just 2 junk weeks of training? Because I don't believe in the typical deloads that are there. Like most of us have deloads built into our life, and
for sure.
And most of us are over exercising but under training. So if you're always needing a deload, your training isn't effective. But if you're always progressing, you're not actually progressing in a way that's going to build muscle, because that could also mean that you're always changing programs every 4 weeks. Because if you're changing programs every 4 weeks, you're going to be always progressing because it's a fresh set of exercises. It's not until you literally cannot progress the weights anymore. And it's like, okay, well, I can't move this anymore. My stiff leg deadlift is one thing that I want to improve. I need to make a reel on that. I should do that today. I still got it. And I'm like, well, now I can say I got my 100.
Yes.
I don't know what that is in thing. I can easily say 5 pounds, but 112 kilos. I was
sure.
Yeah, it was just like, yeah, now I can math. Where's the walking calculator when you need them? But yeah, we'll leave that with you, because I feel like that also can kind of work in with the dieting and this whole process of the journey. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a few great points you mentioned there. I think the thing I'd like to start with is how you mentioned the neurological component to lifting. And actually, backtracking a bit more, you mentioned thinking of yourself more as an athlete when you're going into the gym. And you also mentioned the word skill. And I don't think those are things that most people think of when they're walking into the gym, because they are in the dieting mindset and they're just thinking, Let me do sky high reps to tone. Let me keep things moving. Let me try to break a sweat. Let me try to burn as many calories as possible, rather than thinking of lifting as a skill that you would develop. And the example that I always give is, if I were, trying to get better at tennis, for example, first of all, I couldn't just practice it for 4 weeks, jump ship and do something totally different and expect to get the most out of it. I would have to stick with something longer. But the progression would be, of course, at first, I just start showing up. I develop a level of consistency with actually make it to the court. And then I develop this skill that allows me, say, to serve a lot harder. Because it doesn't matter how strong I feel like I am. If I don't have the skill set, if I haven't refined things neurologically, I will not be able to express any strength that I do have at the highest possible level. So as I continue to refine that skill of serving in this example, over time, I'll be able to serve harder and harder and get more, say, out of the lessons, for example. And it's the same thing in the gym. People think of it as, totally separate from sport and skill development. But I think when you do make that mindset shift of actually, when I walk in, it's almost like practice in a way of refining things neurologically, getting better at the movements so you can produce more force and get more out of those things. It is an absolute game changer. The other thing that really bites people in the butt is blowing things up every 4 weeks, like you also mentioned. If you are continuing to progress on an exercise at a reasonable clip, because if you're taking these massive jumps all the time, the training intensity was likely never there to begin with. But if you're progressing at a reasonable clip over time, there's no need for us to blow things up. And one of my favorite protocols when it comes to programming is almost like partial modifications. So I think most people are thinking, well, I'm doing the A program, and after 4 weeks, I need to switch to the B program. And you swap out all, 12 to 15 exercises that are there. Whereas when I make program modifications, I look at things that are still progressing, things that I'm still getting better at, that I'm looking to get more out of. I'm not touching those. Now, obviously, the novelty factor can be helpful for enjoyment and sustainability. So, there are some things I might swap out. And then some things, the changes can be more moderate. Maybe you switch from, a regular bench press to a close grip bench press. Maybe you're switching to a floor press. So it's still a horizontal press, but the skeleton, the bones of the program are still the same. So I know I touched upon a few things there, but the recurring theme being you have to give yourself the opportunity to develop the skill of the exercises that you're doing so you can train harder, and then mentally learning how to tolerate hard training. And the example I always think of here is half the time on something like a hack squat, I think that I'm training really hard, and then I watch a training video after, and I'm like, my reps didn't slow down that much. So I was feeling it and I thought I was approaching failure, but I looked at a training video after, I easily had another couple reps in the tank. So there's not only the, neurological side of things of skill development, but also the psychological tolerance for hard training, which most people don't quite yet have. But obviously you can refine that over time.
That last bit, psychological tolerance. And because this is going to be your start to 2026, listening to this, when you relate it to the whole journey to nutrition, because most people struggle with nutrition, and because we're so focused on, oh my God, I'm struggling so much with nutrition, we kind of forget that, hey, training is actually a huge part of this. And if we start to go more into the training, that starts to give us a purpose, and they start to work together hand in hand for most people anyway. But it's hard to do that if you keep trying to start at a higher level than you're at, and you don't tie it to what actually means a lot to you. Like, for example, going ice skating with my partner's kid and just gliding along, feeling like I'm bloody, like being able to do all of those things when you're in your late 30s, in your late 40s, being able to still do those things, isn't that something worth living for, worth being fit for, worth being healthy for? Playing around with your grandkids, exercise isn't just for aesthetics, and it's not just to get strong, it's also health. It helps, like, you get more back pain sitting down. The exercising that helps because you're sitting in this position at the desk all the time, then you're going to come up with issues all the time. And if you don't want to end up like that, then these are the things that we need to build in and see it as more than just an aesthetics chase. But I think also, because you mentioned this skill, something I realized actually, if you think about it, the holidays, the end of the year, Thanksgiving, if you celebrate it, Christmas, all these things towards the end of the year with parties, events, what you worry about with food, there being more booze, less structure, having to navigate things differently. If you think about it, that kind of stuff is happening all the way throughout the year. It isn't really any different. You travel throughout the year as well. Go on vacations, social events, you have weddings. There are so many other holiday type of things that happen through the year. Many people get that time off work. So it kind of feels like, oh, I feel like turning the switch off now. If you always feel like that, then we need to figure out what's happening throughout your year to make you want to just throw your hands up at the end of the year, which sometimes doesn't even have all that much to do with training and exercise. It has to do with the pressure that you put on yourself to be go, go, go all the time. You don't put any rest in your day. You don't have any self-care there, or your version of training and dieting is an added aspect of go, go, go. There, you don't see it as that self-care yet. You don't see it as nourishment. It's just more and more effort all of the time. Maybe we have to start addressing these other things, the backpack that's on your back, so that we aren't always coming to this like holiday thing where it feels like it's so much different from the rest of the year, because it's pretty much the same-ish sort of thing, just in a different season. If you can learn to navigate this part and see it as we're not always trying to be in like this dieting mentality. And if you're in America, this is even more pertinent to you guys, because your holidays are pretty much smack bang in the middle of the year, whereas that's our winter and we just go on life as it is. Ours is mostly now towards the end of the year in Australia, where we are having like most of December, most of January-ish off. If you're in like the school or whatever industry, that's what you get to have mostly off. Whereas I just get to take 2 weeks of annual leave. That's the difference. Like there is none really. It's just, how about we start to learn how to navigate these things instead of throwing our hands in the air and saying, well, it's hard because there's this, that, and the other, and I don't know how to track it. So what's the point? I think social media and people on social media have now made this more complicated than it needs to be for everybody, because before people didn't have these big opinions. Like, that's obsessive. That's disordered. If you have to track your food here, you shouldn't have to track your food when you're going. You've never done it before. And if you never practice, you're never going to be aware of what's going on around you. Like, just doesn't need to be perfect. Build up their skill. That's where that skill comes in. The skill of tackling these events, the skill of tracking when you're out, the skill of understanding what's in food, the skill of speaking up for yourself. My partner and I went to dinner. I always say, yeah, I'm allergic to dairy. Can you just make sure there's no butter on any of the salads or any of the veggies, any of the meats? No butter. If there's oil on any of that, I don't want that either. And just put the dressing on the side if that's possible, please. And just do the same for him as well. That's how I order it. And then the lady at the counter goes, do you guys go to the gym? You look so fit. I think I need to start not getting butter on my food as well. We just laughed. I found it so funny, but don't be afraid to ask for what you want. I'm going to let you take that.
Ruby, the timing on this point of the holidays not actually being that different from the rest of the year is unbelievable, because I shit you not, maybe 3 hours ago, I was just talking to another coach about this, where earlier in my career, I almost felt like it was bad or taboo to talk about, still prioritizing your fitness goals during the holidays, because everybody else was saying like, pump the brakes, just try to survive, get by. But when you think about it, so here's a good example. Last night I hosted a Friendsgiving at my house, because my Argentinian friends have never had US Thanksgiving foods before. So I hosted a Friendsgiving. I had people over. Yes, it was Thanksgiving specific food. But in terms of, nutrient density and portions and alcohol opportunities, it wasn't that different than just hosting any other non-Friendsgiving, Thanksgiving type thing. So I'm sitting here questioning, again, I was thinking about it last night. I was talking to another coach about it today. Why are we putting this on such a pedestal? My clients understandably will come to me and say, hey, I had these 2, maybe even 3 holiday get-togethers this week. I'm nervous about how to navigate them. And again, I completely understand that, because we've all put this on a pedestal as this season that we have to survive. But backtracking 2 months, 3 months, when it wasn't technically the holiday season yet, when we're planning for the week, this same client might be saying, hey, I have this date night. I'm going to my in-laws this night, and then I have this night at the bar. You still had 3 things on the calendar. So yes, these are technically holiday specific things, but it's still the same skills, still the same things that we want to work on. And I'm glad we pulled the skill conversation over to the nutrition and lifestyle side of things as well, because things like learning how to plan for, special occasions and events and get-togethers, learning how to track things like this, which isn't remotely as difficult as people think, learning how to structure your day, learning how to, time your meals in a way that manages your hunger quite well. These are all skills that you can refine too. And if you do the thing that most people do, which is, things are crazy like right now, let me revisit this when things settle down and I can fully commit. Just like this training recurring theme, nutrition and lifestyle wise, you are ridding yourself of the opportunity to learn how to navigate real life. And I know we feel like the holidays are different, but it's virtually the same set of obstacles that you're going to face the entire year. The occasion might technically be different, but the obstacles themselves, they're the same. So I would push anybody here, because this is a relevant message, no matter the time of year. You need to stop kicking the can down the road as if things are ever going to truly settle down at some point, because life's life. It's going to be mostly the same cadence the vast majority of the time. And you need to start learning you need to develop the skill of learning how to navigate that in spite of any sort of craziness. But the sooner you tackle it, the sooner you'll be able to take every season of life in stride, whether it is the holidays, whether it's, well, the new year's crazy for me, and, gearing up for the summer. The summer is nuts, but you've already developed those skills. So now everything else you can take in stride much more seamlessly.
Approach your journey with the mindset of, I want to learn the skill of developing a lifestyle where I don't have to think about the next diet. I don't have to think about getting back on track. I'm always moving forward. I'm always a work in progress, but I'm also happy with where I am because I'm doing the things and I'm showing up to my word. And that is always the biggest part. If you're not showing up to your word and you're not holding promises with yourself, that's when everything starts to fall apart. That's when you start to feel a lot more disconnected to yourself. Knowing those values within yourself and revisiting your values, because your values are going to keep shifting over time until you get to know yourself more. And I think the biggest part of any long-term transformation, or a transformation that sticks, or a transformation that feels and has a life that is just as filling and good and full of just everything, is one that's based on self-development. Ones that are based on you becoming a better version of yourself, because that usually happens in the process. But I feel like ever since I started reading books and expanding what I listen to and getting other soundtracks into my own head, so I'm not just playing the same soundtrack that I've played for years and years and years, has just added so much more to my journey, so much more to me, so much more texture, so much more volume, dimensions. It's just expanded me. And that's actually a really good word that I want to stick. So yeah, expand your meaning of progress. Live a life of expansion. If you haven't yet thought on your theme for the year, like what you want this year to be about, and then tracked it into 3 sub themes, I would say do that. I'm adding expansion onto my list as one of the sub themes. Feeling a lot more alive, a lot more sparky. And I feel like if we can add a lot more of that to everything we do, it becomes a lot more fulfilling, a lot more enjoyable. There is a difference between showing up to something with a drive to improve.
So I love how you kind of have these general North Stars that you are developing for the new year. So say expansion, for example, and how they come from a place of the approach-based goals that we talked about. What can I add to my life? What can I look to do more of? How can I grow? How can I think about things from a place of abundance, compared to, I think, the goals that most people tend to set, which are very avoidance-based, reduction-based, restriction-based, whether it is, nutrition, whether it is something training related, or just life in general, the things I'm going to stop doing or stay away from. And, those have their merit, of course, but I do think, and again, it's been consistent throughout this entire conversation, if we flip things a bit and start looking at what we can seek out, where we can grow, how we can develop, just the energy shift and the enjoyability, the sustainability factor go through the roof.
Enjoyment. If you're not enjoying it, if you're not experiencing it, I think once you start to stop the mental masturbation of trying to plan everything else ahead and know every single what if that's coming down the road, you'll finally allow yourself to start experiencing the process. If you're not experiencing it, if you're always trying to be so analytical, so mathematical about it all, this is really hard if you're an accountant or someone that always needs to feel like you're someone that's always a tracker type of person. I feel like the more you are on that spectrum, the less you're going to enjoy the journey, the less you're going to sustain it. You're always going to feel like you're missing that one thing. I was that person. I was always doing, I'm going to track every single measurement. But now I'm like, I do it for the things that actually matter. These are the action steps, but it's not I'm measuring all these outcomes. It's measuring the time spent doing the things that lead to XYZ. I feel like once you do that and you make your process stuff the goals, the things you track, because just because you can measure it doesn't mean that it's worth measuring. And it doesn't mean that those measurements are the things that are going to get you results. So be careful what you're measuring, because sometimes they can keep you trapped.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Of course, I think many of us have heard the what gets measured gets managed, but I don't think I've ever heard somebody explain it the way you just did, where just because we can measure it doesn't mean we necessarily need to. So yeah, I think that's a great closing point for us.
Just because you can manage it or measure it, is it something you need to manage if it's not actually serving you to move you forward, or if it's just keeping it? Because most things that we've been taught to measure have come from fat loss playbooks and shit in the past that clearly did not serve us. So it goes back to the whole point of let yourself start as a beginner, learn the skills, be willing to have a beginner's mindset, and you will take yourself very far. And if you want to find Sam on anything, he is back on his transformation talks. I have a podcast on there as well. Do I have 2 on there or just 1?
I can't remember if I broke it up into 2, at least 1.
Okay, well then I have 1 because you didn't break it up into 2. I can't remember if I did another one because I got you back onto my podcast for another one. But yeah, if you want to visit him there, he's on that podcast, and you will also find him down below, Sam Forget, spelt like forget. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, let us know, and you're probably tuned out by now, but I would really appreciate a 5-star rating. Sam, can you also give me a 5-star rating, please? I'm trying to get to 100 stars on this podcast, but I appreciate you all for listening, and you'll hear me on the next podcast.